Today we're talking about how the Morrison government has decided to extend the JobKeeper and JobSeeker subsidies into the future. Whenever I want Siri, she's nowhere to be found. Only when I don't want her does she turn up. Much like Scott Morrison. So Scott Morrison announced a couple of days ago that the JobSeeker and JobKeeper programs would be extended beyond their previous September deadline. Of course, this being an LNP government, there are no free lunches. It is at a reduced rate. Which does kind of beg the question, like, why? The purpose of the JobSeeker and JobKeeper programs is to keep people going in the midst of a pandemic when their work might otherwise be unavailable to them. I think it's laudable that the government is extending these programs into 2021. But the question is, if there's no work to go back to, what exactly is the purpose of reducing the rates? Currently, if you're on JobKeeper, you're getting $1,500 a fortnight pre-tax from the government via your employer. And that's got to pay for everything. That's got to pay for your rent or mortgage. That's got to pay for groceries, bills, everything. And hopefully, I guess you don't run a monthly budget that's in excess of that, because otherwise you'll be going backwards. But for most people, if they're on it, it seems like it's been an acceptable solution to keeping people inside at home during the pandemic and having them being able to pay all their bills. The question is, if you needed $1,500 a fortnight in order to survive before, why would you need only $1,200 a fortnight to survive after September, and then $1,000 a fortnight to survive after that? Clearly, the objective is to taper off these payments and get people back into work, which under ordinary circumstances would make sense. But if it were ordinary circumstances, we wouldn't need a wage subsidy in the first place. During this announcement, by the way, Scott Morrison and a guy who sounds desperately like he's spending 80% of his cognitive energy trying not to gaffe Josh Frydenberg were patting themselves on the back so hard as to make everyone else nauseous about how good the JobKeeper program was, how successful it had been, and how well it was going to do into the future. Neglecting, of course, to mention that it was only at the behest of people like Sally McManus that the wage subsidy even got passed in the first place. Just a week before the JobKeeper program was announced, the LNP government was basically denying ever having to institute one in the first place. But all of that aside from patting yourself on the back for a job well done for something that you didn't even want in the first place, I just don't understand, like, the economic argument, B, the moral argument. It's uncontroversial to say that in a time of economic crisis, the more economic stimulus that the government can put into the economy, the easier a recovery is likely to be. In a consumer economy where the vast majority of economic activity is predicated on people consuming things, going out and buying stuff rather than necessarily, building cars or producing or things like that, it's a pretty straightforward equation. If people have more money in their pockets, they're more likely to go out and spend it on stuff. When they go out and spend it on stuff, stores have money, stores need to buy stuff from their suppliers, suppliers can ship goods. The economy is a virtuous circle. But the more you restrict these payments, the more you tighten things up, the less disposable income people are going to have for these kinds of consumer goods, the less they're likely to go out and spend it, the deeper the recession is going to be as a result of this, and the longer the recovery will take. This is not like a deep economic analysis. It's pretty obvious just based on fundamentals of cash flow, right? But something which seems oddly absent in all of this discussion about the economy and JobKeeper and JobSeeker and any other programs that sound almost exactly alike and are easily confusable, is that there's no justification as to why these programs are being wound down. Like, it just seems to be accepted that, like, well, of course we need to wind these down after a certain amount of time. Because deficit, I guess. Granted, this extension is going to run the program up to a cost of $86 billion, but isn't this exactly what sovereign debt is for? Like, to get money at a time like during a global financial crisis / pandemic and get it into the hands of citizens so they can spend it in order to lower the amount of dip, avoid a depression, and bounce back as quickly as possible. This is more or less the literal point of sovereign debt. And yet, when it comes to large-scale defense projects, apparently there's always money in the banana stand for that, an extra $270 billion worth that they announced just weeks ago. But for a life-saving wage subsidy that makes a difference to millions of Australians, apparently that's needless debt raising and we need to get it under control, I guess. I don't know. Beyond like ideological posturing, I really don't understand what the problem is with just extending this current... Like, if you agree that the program needs to be extended because of this review, why would it not be extended at the current rates? That's what I don't understand. Where's the justification for that? In times when everything's going fine and there are jobs to go to, you could go, okay, well, it makes sense. You don't want to stay on the dole forever. You want to get out there and go and find your own work. But if you have a situation like we do now, where the government has asked us to stay home, there aren't jobs out there. If you have 1 million people looking for jobs and 100,000 jobs available, it doesn't matter how much you hustle or how good at job hunting you are, there is always going to be roughly 900,000 people that are out of work. And what do we do with those people? Secondly, there is kind of just the moral argument as to like, in a time of crisis, when things are going badly, to just expect the people who have been the hardest done by in this crisis to cop the burden on the chin and try and live on even less, it just doesn't strike me as like morally conscionable that we're asking people to do that. I understand we can't stay in a permanent state of what is essentially universal basic income, but when case numbers in Victoria aren't going down, they're actually increasing day on day, and we're getting some of the worst numbers that we've seen since the start of the outbreak. It's not as though people not going back to work is a function of laziness. It's a function of we can't go back to work because the government is staying home. So on the one hand, you've got the government saying, please, everyone stay home. We need to shut down full sectors of the economy to stop the spread of the virus. And also the government is saying, get back to work, you fucking lazy pleb. You can't just live on government assistance forever, mate. And it just seems rational that if the government's asking you to stay home, the government will give you food to live. I don't know, maybe I'm a crazy lefty with these crazy ideas that people can't survive on eating dust.
Anybody? No? Dust. It's actually very low, in fact. So you can have as much dust as you like.
I don't know, is the argument that we can't have too much debt because we're, as Josh Frydenberg admitted in that same press conference, we're servicing our debt fine. We have no problem going into further debt for the $270 billion of military spending that we're wanting to do over the next 10 years. So what is the reason? What's the justification for tightening these things up beyond just an ideological position against debt and people getting money for nothing? Except it's not for nothing, it's to live during the course of a once-in-100-year crisis. I don't know, I'd like to see Scott Morrison living on $1,500 a fortnight. I'd love to see how he managed that. And I'm one of the lucky ones. I'm in a situation where I've been really conservative with my finances and our monthly budget is not a lot and we can get by. But there's a lot of people who have obligations beyond just a very simple frugal budget. They have family commitments, they have, mortgage commitments that can't be put off any longer. There's a lot of people that are just going to go backwards, and if they can't afford to go backwards because they don't have the savings, I guess they're just shit out of luck. And the government doesn't seem to give two fucks about that. Anyway, not super funny, not packed full of jokes, just truth. And the truth is immensely fucking depressing. It's good to have an extra couple of months of some certainty, but hell, like, it really doesn't bode well. If we're already talking about austerity measures, and cuts, it's clear to me that this recession is going to go on and on for months, if not years, to come. Tell me what you think. Put your comments down below. We'll see you guys in the next episode. Peace.